Dr. Lisa Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished treating her last patient of the day. The small medical clinic on New Haven Colony was always busy, but today had been especially hard. 3 different alien species had come in with various problems, and her translator device had been acting up all morning. Lisa looked out the window at the sprawling human settlement. 50,000 people called New Haven home, and it served as a trading post for dozens of alien races. Most days she loved the challenge of treating different species. Today she just wanted to go home and sleep. The comm system on her desk buzzed with an urgent message. Colony Administrator Jake Sullivan's voice crackled through the speaker, and he sounded worried. "Lisa, we need you at the spaceport right away. We have a situation." Lisa grabbed her medical bag and rushed outside. The spaceport was only a 10-minute walk from her clinic, but she could already see something was wrong. A massive ship hung in the sky above the landing pad, bigger than anything she had ever seen before. It was dark gray and covered in sharp spikes that made it look like a giant weapon. When she reached the spaceport, Jake was waiting for her with Captain Amy Foster from Colony Defense. Both of them looked nervous. "What's going on?" Lisa asked. Jake pointed at the huge ship. "That's a Zenthari dreadnought. They want to land, but they're not saying why they're here." Lisa felt her stomach drop. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Zenthari. They were 12 feet tall, covered in armor-like skin, and had claws that could cut through steel. They were the most feared warriors in known space. No one had ever seen them ask for help or show any weakness. Most species just stayed out of their way. "Why would they come here?" Lisa asked. "We don't know," Amy said. "They've never visited a human colony before. Our sensors show the ship is armed with enough weapons to destroy half the planet." The comm system crackled to life. A deep, harsh voice spoke in broken human language. "Human settlement. This is War Prime Kethvar of the Zenthari fleet. We request permission to land. We need your help." Jake, Amy, and Lisa looked at each other in shock. A Zenthari was asking for help. That had never happened before in recorded history. Jake picked up the comm device with shaking hands. "This is Colony Administrator Sullivan. You have permission to land, but we need to know what kind of help you need." There was a long pause. When the voice came back, it sounded different. Less angry, more desperate. "We carry cubs. Our young are dying. We have heard that humans can heal what our medicine cannot." Lisa's medical training kicked in immediately. "How many patients? What are their symptoms?" 17 cubs. They suffer from neural decay. Our healers say there is no cure. They will die within days." The massive ship began to descend toward the landing pad. As it got closer, Lisa could see it was even bigger than she thought. It had to be at least a mile long. The ground shook when it finally touched down. "Lisa, are you sure about this?" Jake asked. "We don't know anything about Zenthari medicine. What if you can't help them?" "Then 17 children will die," Lisa said simply. "I became a doctor to save lives. It doesn't matter what species they are." A section of the ship's hull opened, and a ramp extended to the ground. Heavy footsteps echoed from inside the ship. Then War Prime Kethvar appeared. He was everything the story said and more. 12 feet tall, with dark blue-gray skin that looked like armor plates. His hands ended in razor-sharp claws, and his face had 4 glowing yellow eyes. When he spoke, Lisa could see rows of pointed teeth, but something was wrong. This fearsome warrior looked tired. His shoulders sagged and his eyes seemed dim. When he walked down the ramp, his steps were slow and heavy. "I am War Prime Kethvar," he said in his deep voice. "I command this ship and 300 warriors." He paused and looked directly at Lisa. "I have never asked another species for help. My people would call this shameful. But our cubs are dying and we cannot save them." Lisa stepped forward. Even standing close to him, she had to crane her neck to look up at his face. "I'm Dr. Martinez. I'll do everything I can to help them." Kethvar studied her for a long moment. "You are very small. How can such a small creature heal what our greatest healers cannot?" "Size doesn't matter in medicine," Lisa said. "What matters is knowledge and caring. Can I see the patients?" The War Prime nodded and turned back toward his ship. "Follow me," But know this, human doctor. These cubs are the last of their generation. If they die, my people face extinction. That is why I have put aside our pride to come here. As they walked up the ramp into the alien ship, Lisa felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. 17 young lives depended on her, and possibly the future of an entire species. The inside of the ship was dark and smelled strange. Alien symbols glowed on the walls, and the corridor was wide enough for the massive Zenthari to walk comfortably. Lisa's footsteps seemed tiny compared to the heavy boots of the warriors around her. "Why did you come to humans?" Lisa asked as they walked. "There are other species with advanced medicine." Kethvar was quiet for a moment. "We have heard stories. Stories that humans heal not just the body but also the spirit. Our cubs need both." They reached a large room filled with strange medical equipment. In the center were 17 small beds, each one holding a young Zenthari. The cubs were much smaller than the adults, about the size of human children, but they already had the same armored skin and claws. Lisa approached the nearest bed. The young Zenthari was unconscious, breathing slowly. Medical monitors that she didn't recognize showed readings that meant nothing to her. "What exactly is neural decay?" she asked. "Their brain patterns are failing," Kethvar explained. "They cannot stay awake for more than a few minutes. They do not eat. They do not respond to our voices. Each day they grow weaker." Lisa looked around the room at all the small, still forms. 17 dying children, and their families were counting on her to save them. She had never felt more challenged or more determined in her life. "I'll need to run my own tests," she said. "And I'll need help from my team back at the colony." "You will have whatever you need," Kethvar said. "Just please and save our cubs." Lisa spent the next 6 hours running tests on the sick cubs. Her portable medical scanner worked on Zenthari biology, but the readings made little sense. Their brain activity was almost flat, like they were in a deep coma. Their hearts beat very slowly and their breathing was shallow. She called her team back at the colony. Danny Rodriguez, her best nurse, arrived first. He was a young man with gentle hands and a calm voice that made even the most scared patients feel better. Behind him came 3 more medical staff members. The Zenthari warriors watched every move they made. The aliens stood like giant statues around the room, their yellow eyes following the humans everywhere. Lisa could feel their suspicion and anger. They didn't trust the small humans with their precious cubs. "Their brain chemistry is completely different from anything I've seen," Lisa told Danny quietly. "But there are similarities to human neural patterns. I think something is blocking the connections between different parts of their brains." Danny nodded and approached one of the beds. The cub lying there was a small female, barely 3 feet tall. Her dark blue skin was pale, and her breathing was so quiet it was hard to tell if she was alive. "What's her name?" Danny asked War Prime Kethvar. The large warrior looked surprised by the question. "Cubs do not receive names until they prove themselves in combat trials. She is simply young female number 7. Danny frowned. "She needs a name. I can't take care of someone without knowing what to call them." He looked down at the small face. "I'll call you Zixara. That sounds like a strong name." Several Zenthari warriors made angry clicking sounds. One of them stepped forward, his claws extended. "You will not name our cubs, soft human. You are here to heal them, nothing more." War Prime Kethvar held up a hand to stop the angry warrior. "Let the healer work as he needs to. If naming helps the healing, then so be it." Danny began examining Zixara more closely. He checked her pulse, looked at her eyes, and tested her reflexes. The cub didn't respond to anything. As he worked, he began humming softly under his breath. It was an old lullaby his grandmother had sung to him when he was scared as a child. Suddenly, the medical monitors around Zixara's bed started beeping. Her heart rate increased, and her brain activity spiked on the scanner. For the first time in days, her eyes fluttered open. The room went completely silent. Every Zenthari warrior stared at the monitors in shock. Lisa rushed over with her scanner. "Her neural activity just jumped by 40%, she said in amazement. "What did you do?" "I was just humming. Danny said, confused. It's something I do when I work with sick kids. War Prime Kethvar stepped closer to the bed. The cub's eyes are open. This has not happened in many days. Zixara's eyes moved slowly, looking around the room. When her gaze found Danny's face, she made a small sound. It was barely a whisper, but it was the first sound any of the cubs had made since they got sick. Try humming again, Lisa said urgently. Danny began the same lullaby. Zixara's eyes focused on him, and her breathing became stronger. The other medical monitors showed improvements across all her vital signs. This is impossible, one of the Zenthari healers said. Sound cannot heal neural decay. Maybe it's not just sound, Lisa said, thinking hard. Danny, what else were you doing? Nothing special. I was just being gentle with her, treating her like I would any sick child. Lisa felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in her mind. The neural decay might not be a disease. What if it's caused by something missing from their environment? She turned to War Prime Kethvar. Tell me about how Zenthari cubs are normally raised. The warrior looked uncomfortable. Cubs are kept in nursery facilities. They are fed and cleaned by automated systems. When they reach proper age, they begin combat training. What about emotional care? Comfort? Play? Such things make cubs weak. They must learn strength from birth. Lisa looked around at all the unconscious young Zenthari. I think that's the problem. Their brains are shutting down because they're not getting the stimulation they need to develop properly. You speak nonsense, another warrior said. Emotional weakness has never been necessary for Zenthari survival. While they argued, Danny continued to hum softly to Zixara. The little cub was now looking directly at him, and her eyes seemed more alert. When he reached out and gently touched her hand, she didn't pull away. Captain Amy Foster's voice came over the comm system from outside the ship. Lisa, we have a problem. More Zenthari ships are arriving. The colony defense grid is picking up. At least 12 more vessels. War Prime Kethvar's expression darkened. Other clan leaders have followed us here. If we cannot save the cubs, they will blame me for showing weakness to aliens. Through the windows of the medical bay, Lisa could see more of the massive ships descending from space. Each one was as big as the first, and they all looked ready for war. This is getting dangerous, one of Lisa's medical team whispered. Maybe we should leave. No, Danny said firmly. He was still holding Zixara's small hand. Look at her. She's getting better. We can't abandon them now. Lisa made a decision. We stay, but I need to contact the colony. We're going to need more help. She opened a channel to Jake Sullivan. Jake, I need volunteers from the colony, people who are good with children, as many as you can find. Lisa, are you crazy? The sky is full of Zenthari warships. People are scared. The cubs are responding to emotional care. They need human attention to survive. Please, Jake, find people who understand how to comfort frightened children. There was a pause. I'll put out the call, but I can't promise anyone will volunteer to come aboard an alien warship. Within an hour, something amazing happened. Despite the fear and danger, 37 colonists showed up at the spaceport. They were teachers, parents, grandparents, and anyone who had experience caring for children. Some brought blankets and toys. Others carried food and books. Helen Brooks, a retired school teacher, was the first aboard the ship. She was a small, elderly woman with gray hair and kind eyes. When she saw the room full of sick cubs, she didn't hesitate. "Oh, you poor babies," she said softly, approaching the nearest bed. "Don't worry. We're here to help you feel better." The Zenthari warriors watched in confusion as the humans spread throughout the room. Each volunteer took a position near one of the sick cubs and began doing what came naturally to them. They spoke in gentle voices, sang quiet songs, and offered comfort to the alien children. One by one, the medical monitors began showing improvements. The cubs started opening their eyes, moving slightly, and making soft sounds. It was slow progress, but it was progress. War Prime Kethvar stood in the corner of the room, watching everything with amazement. "I do not understand," he said to Lisa. How can such soft behavior heal what our strongest medicine could not? Sometimes strength isn't about being hard, Lisa replied. Sometimes it's about being brave enough to be gentle. As night fell on New Haven, the medical bay was filled with an unusual sight. Dozens of humans sat beside the beds of alien children, providing the kind of care that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with love. For the first time since the cubs had gotten sick, War Prime Kethavar felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. 3 days passed and the changes in the sick cubs were amazing. What had started as a desperate medical emergency was turning into something no one had expected. The human volunteers worked in shifts around the clock, making sure each cub always had someone nearby. Helen Brooks had barely left Zixara's side since arriving. The elderly teacher sat in a chair next to the small bed, reading stories from human children's books. Even though Zixara couldn't understand the words, she seemed to love the sound of Helen's gentle voice. The cub's eyes were now bright and alert, and she could sit up on her own. Once upon a time there was a brave little rabbit, Helen read softly. Zixara made small clicking sounds that almost sounded like she was trying to talk back. Danny Rodriguez had been working 18-hour shifts without complaint. He moved between the beds, checking on each cub and talking to them like they were his own children. Several of the cubs now turned their heads when they heard his voice. Carlos Mendez, the colony's best engineer, had been busy building special beds that could adjust to each cub's size and needs. He also created soft toys that were safe for the young Zenthari to hold. Many of the cubs now clutched these toys while they slept. Maria Santos, who ran the colony's main restaurant, had figured out how to make foods that tasted good to the recovering cubs. She spent hours in the ship's kitchen, mixing human spices with Zenthari nutrients. The cubs were now eating solid food for the first time in weeks. War Prime Kethavar watched all of this with growing confusion. He had never seen adults spend so much time caring for young ones. In Zenthari society, cubs were expected to be tough and independent from birth. "Why do your people do this?" he asked Lisa as they watched Danny teaching 3 cubs how to stack colored blocks. "These are not even your young. What do you gain from helping them?" Lisa thought about the question carefully. "We don't gain anything except knowing that we helped. Humans believe that all children deserve love and care no matter who they are or where they come from. But this makes them weak," Kethavar said, though his voice didn't sound as sure as before. "How will they survive if they expect such treatment?" "Look at them," Lisa said, pointing to the cubs who were now playing together on the floor. "Are they weak? Or are they growing stronger because they feel safe and loved?" The cubs were indeed getting stronger every day. They could walk around the medical bay, play simple games, and even learned a few words in human language. Their recovery was faster than Lisa had dared to hope. But the most amazing change was happening to the adult Zenthari. The warriors who had been so suspicious and angry were now asking questions about everything the humans did. One morning, a young warrior named Vextor approached Danny. "Human Danny," he said in careful English. "Why do you sing to the cubs when they are afraid?" Danny was sitting with 2 cubs who had woken up from bad dreams. He was humming the same lullaby that had first helped Zixara. "Music helps them feel better," Danny explained. "When someone is scared or sad, gentle sounds can make them feel safe. On our world, fear is something cubs must overcome alone," Vextor said. "We do not help them with such weakness." "Maybe fear isn't always weakness," Danny said. "Maybe being afraid just means you need someone to remind you that you're not alone." Steve Patterson, who worked in colony maintenance, was showing a group of warriors how he taught his own son to ride a bicycle. He had brought pictures of the boy learning, falling down and getting back up with his father's encouragement. "The child fell many times," observed one warrior. "Why did you not let him learn through pain alone?" "Because learning is better when you have support," Steve explained. "My son became braver because he knew I would help him, not because I left him to struggle by himself." Rachel Morgan, the security chief, found herself explaining human family structures to fascinated Zenthari warriors. They couldn't understand why human parents stayed with their children for so many years. "In our society, cubs leave their parents after 2 seasons," a warrior told her. They must prove they can survive without help. But what if they're not ready? Rachel asked. What if they need more time to grow strong? The warrior looked confused. Then they are weak, and weakness must be removed from the bloodline. Rachel watched little Zixara playing with a toy that Carlos had made for her. The cub was laughing, a sound that made all the humans smile and seemed to puzzle the adult Zenthari. That cub was dying 3 days ago, Rachel said. Now look at her. She's not weak. She just needed love to help her grow. The biggest moment came when Dr. Martinez had to perform an emergency procedure on the sickest cub, a small male that Helen had named Corwin. The cub had taken a turn for the worse, and his brain activity was dropping dangerously low. I need to try something risky, Lisa told War Prime Kethvar. I want to create a neural link between myself and the cub. It might help stabilize his brain patterns, but it could be dangerous for both of us. You would risk your life for a Zenthari cub? Kethvar asked in amazement. He's just a child who needs help, Lisa said simply. That's enough. The procedure took 4 hours. Lisa connected her brain to Corwin's using experimental technology, sharing her own neural patterns to help guide his damaged ones back to normal function. The process was exhausting and painful, but it worked. When Corwin's eyes opened and he spoke his first word, a weak mama directed at Helen Brooks, War Prime Kethvar felt something break inside his chest. It was like a wall that had been built around his heart was crumbling. I do not understand, he said to Jake Sullivan, who had come to check on the situation. Your people risk everything for our cubs. You ask for nothing in return. This goes against everything we know about survival. Jake watched Helen feeding Corwin with a spoon, making silly faces to make the cub laugh. Maybe survival isn't just about being the strongest, he said. Maybe it's about making sure everyone has a chance to grow up happy and healthy. That night, as War Prime Kethvar walked through the medical bay, he saw something that changed everything. Danny was sitting on the floor with 6 cubs around him, teaching them a clapping game. The cubs were giggling and trying to copy his movements. For the first time in his life, Kethvar heard the sound of young Zenthari laughing with pure joy. It was a sound his species had forgotten existed. Watching these small beings play and learn without fear or pain, he realized that what the humans called weakness might actually be the greatest strength of all. The cubs were not just healing from their sickness. They were becoming something new, something his people had never seen before. They were becoming children who knew they were loved. By the end of the first week, all 17 cubs were awake and active. They ran around the medical bay, played games with the human volunteers, and even started learning basic English words. The change was so complete that it was hard to believe. These were the same dying children who had arrived just days before. War Prime Kethvar found himself spending more and more time watching the humans work with the cubs. He was especially fascinated by how patient they were. When little Zixara spilled her food, Helen Brooks just smiled and cleaned it up. When Corwin had trouble learning to tie his shoes, Danny Rodriguez showed him the same knot 20 times without getting angry. This is not how warriors are made, Vextor said to Kethvar one morning. They were watching Steve Patterson teach 3 cubs how to play catch with a soft ball. No, Kethvar agreed. But look at them. They are stronger now than when they arrived. Their bodies have healed, but more than that, their spirits are alive. Another warrior, Zach Moore, approached them. War Prime, the other clan leaders are asking questions. They say we have been here too long. They want to know when we will return home. Kethvar knew this was becoming a problem. 12 other Zenthari ships waited in orbit around New Haven. The warriors on those ships were getting impatient. They didn't understand why the cubs needed so much time to recover, or why Kethvar was allowing humans to change Zenthari traditions. Tell them the cubs are not ready to travel, Kethvar said. Tell them we need more time. But he knew that wasn't the real reason he didn't want to leave. The truth was, he was learning things about his own species that shocked him. For generations, Zenthari cubs had died young or grown up damaged. They had accepted this as natural, as the price of creating strong warriors. Now he was seeing what Zenthari cubs could become when they were given love and care. Jake Sullivan came to visit every day. and Kethavar found himself talking to the human administrator about things he had never discussed with anyone. Our species is dying, Kethavar admitted one afternoon. They were sitting in the ship's conference room while the cubs played in the medical bay nearby. For centuries, fewer and fewer cubs survive to adulthood. Those who do survive are often broken inside. We thought this was natural selection making us stronger. Maybe it was just making you sadder, Jake said gently. Strong doesn't have to mean alone. Kethavar looked through the window at Zixara, who was sitting in Helen's lap while the old teacher read her a story. That cub has learned more about joy in 1 week than most Zenthari learn in their entire lives. How is this possible? Because someone showed her it was safe to be happy, Jake explained. Children need to feel secure before they can grow into confident adults. The breakthrough moment came when Maria Santos brought her own 8-year-old daughter Lucy to meet the cubs. Lucy had been asking to see the alien children ever since her mother started cooking for them. When Lucy walked into the medical bay, all 17 cubs gathered around her with curiosity. She was closer to their size than the adult humans, and they seemed fascinated by her. "Hi," Lucy said cheerfully. "I'm Lucy. My mom makes your food. Do you want to play?" She pulled out a simple card game and sat on the floor. Within minutes, she had taught the cubs how to play. Soon the room was filled with the sound of children laughing together, human and alien playing as if there was no difference between them. War Prime Kethavar stood watching with several other warriors. For the first time, he could see his cubs, not as future soldiers but as children who deserved childhood. "War Prime," Vexter said quietly. "I have been thinking about what the humans do with their young. Perhaps there is wisdom in it." "What do you mean?" "My own cub time was filled with trials and pain. I was taught that this made me strong, but I have never felt joy like these cubs feel. I have never laughed the way they laugh. Maybe I am strong, but I am also empty inside." Other warriors began to share similar thoughts. Zachmore talked about how he barely remembered his parents, who had sent him away when he was very young. Another warrior, Rexnall, admitted that he sometimes felt afraid and alone but had never been allowed to show such emotions. "The humans say that being gentle makes you weak," Rexnall said. "But I have watched Danny Rodriguez work for 7 days without stopping. I have seen Dr. Martinez risk her life for our cubs. These humans are the strongest beings I have ever met, and they are strong because they care, not despite it." Dr. Martinez approached their group looking tired but happy. "The cubs are completely healthy now," she told Kethavar. "Medically, they're ready to go home whenever you want." "But are they ready to return to our world?" Kethavar asked. "To a place where such joy and gentleness are forbidden?" Lisa understood what he was really asking. "You're worried about what will happen to them. Our society will try to make them hard again. They will be punished for showing happiness or asking for comfort. Everything they have learned here will be beaten out of them. Then maybe your society needs to change," Lisa said carefully. Kethavar was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said something that surprised everyone. "Dr. Martinez, would it be possible for some humans to come to our homeworld? As teachers and advisors? You want us to help change how you raise your children?" "I want to save my people," Kethavar said. "We have been dying for centuries because we forgot how to live. These cubs have shown me what we could be if we remembered how to love our young." That evening, Kethavar made a video call to the Zenthari High Council on the homeworld. It was a difficult conversation. He had to explain why he was asking humans to help change 1,000-year-old traditions. "You have gone soft, Kethavar," one council member said. "You let aliens corrupt our cubs with their weakness." "Look at them," Kethavar said, turning the camera to show the cubs playing happily in the background. "Look at their strength, their intelligence, their joy. When have you ever seen Zenthari cubs like this?" The council members fell silent as they watched the video. Zixara was helping Corwin build a tower with blocks. 3 other cubs were singing a human song that Danny had taught them. They all looked healthy, happy, and alive in a way that no adult Zenthari could remember seeing. "These cubs will grow up to be better warriors than any we have produced in generations," Kethavar continued. not because they are hard, but because they know they are loved. Love gives them something worth fighting for. The council agreed to let a small group of humans visit the Zenthari homeworld, but only as an experiment. If the results were not good, the humans would be sent away. As Kethvar ended the call, he felt both hope and fear. He was about to try changing his entire civilization, but watching little Lucy Santos teach Zixara how to braid friendship bracelets, he knew it was worth the risk. The cubs weren't the only ones who had been healed on New Haven. An entire species was about to learn what it meant to love their children. 6 months had passed since the first human volunteers stepped aboard the Zenthari ship. Now, a small group of humans lived on the Zenthari homeworld of Kethara, working in the planet's largest nursery facility. The changes they had brought were beyond anything anyone had imagined. Dr. Lisa Martinez stood in the observation deck of the nursery, watching Danny Rodriguez teach a group of 20 young Zenthari cubs how to play a singing game. The cubs sat in a circle, clapping their hands and trying to remember the words to a human children's song. Their laughter echoed through the large room. "Impossible," said Elder Vokhtar, one of the oldest Zenthari on the High Council. He stood beside Lisa, staring at the cubs with amazement. "In my 300 years of life, I have never heard such sounds from our young." "They're just being children," Lisa said with a smile. "This is how kids are supposed to sound when they're happy." The nursery on Kethara had been completely redesigned. The cold, sterile rooms where cubs used to be kept had been replaced with warm, colorful spaces filled with toys, books, and comfortable places to rest. Human volunteers worked alongside Zenthari caregivers, teaching them new ways to help their young grow strong. Helen Brooks, now known to all the cubs as Grandmother Helen, was in the corner reading a story to a group of cubs who had just arrived from different parts of the planet. Her gentle voice had become famous throughout Zenthari space. Parents would bring their sick or troubled cubs just to hear her read. And the brave little fox found his way home because he remembered that his family loved him. Helen finished the story. The cubs made happy clicking sounds and begged for another tale. War Prime Kethvar, now simply called Father Kethvar by the cubs, entered the nursery. He had traded his warrior armor for simple clothes that didn't scare the young ones. In his arms he carried a tiny cub that couldn't have been more than a few days old. "This is Nexara," he told Lisa. "Her parents brought her from the outer colonies. They heard about what we do here." Lisa looked at the baby cub and smiled. Unlike the sick cubs who had first brought the humans to Zenthari space, this one was healthy and alert. Her eyes were bright with curiosity as she looked around the nursery. "She's beautiful," Lisa said. "Let me introduce her to the others." The older cubs gathered around to see the new baby. They had been taught by the humans to be gentle with smaller cubs, and they took turns very carefully touching Nexara's tiny hands. Zixara, who was now almost a year older and much bigger, sang a soft lullaby that Danny had taught her. Danny approached the group carrying a report tablet. "Lisa, you need to see the latest numbers." The statistics were amazing. In the 6 months since humans had started working with Zenthari cubs, the survival rate had increased by 80%. More importantly, the cubs who grew up with human-style care were showing intelligence levels far higher than any previous generation. The cubs are learning faster, staying healthier, and developing better social skills, Danny explained to a group of visiting Zenthari officials. But most importantly, they're growing up without the fear and anger that used to define your species. One of the officials, a stern-looking warrior named Grixath, looked skeptical. But will they still be able to fight when necessary? Strength. Through combat has been our way for thousands of years. Carlos Mendez, who had been teaching older cubs how to build and fix things, overheard the question. "Come see the training area," he said. He led them to a large room where teenage Zenthari were practicing combat skills. But this wasn't the brutal, painful training of the old days. The young Zenthari were learning to fight with discipline and control, guided by instructors who praised good technique and helped students learn from mistakes. They're better fighters than the old system produced, Carlos explained. They're stronger because they fight to protect things they love, not because they're angry and afraid. Maria Santos had established kitchens throughout the nursery where cubs learn to cook food for themselves and others. Caring for others makes them feel important, she told the officials. When children feel valued, they try harder to be good. The most amazing change was in the adult Zenthari themselves. Parents who had once dropped off their cubs and left them to be raised by machines now visited every day. They read stories, played games, and learned how to show love to their children. Vextor, the young warrior who had first questioned human methods, now had a cub of his own. Lisa watched him carefully feeding his son, making silly faces to make the baby laugh. I was raised without love, Vextor told her. I thought love was weakness. Now I see that love is what makes life worth living. My son will grow up knowing he is precious to me. The changes weren't limited to the nursery. Throughout Zenthari society, families were staying together longer. Cubs were given names when they were born instead of when they proved themselves in combat. The divorce rate had dropped dramatically as parents learned to support each other in raising their children. Steve Patterson had established workshops where Zenthari fathers learned skills that human dads took for granted. He taught them how to play catch, help with homework, and comfort children who had bad dreams. On Earth, we have a saying, Steve told a group of new fathers. Anyone can make a baby, but it takes someone special to be a dad. Rachel Morgan worked with Zenthari mothers, teaching them that protecting their children didn't mean making them hard. True protection means creating a safe place where children can grow into their full potential, she explained. The success on Cathara had attracted attention from across the galaxy. Other species were asking for human help with their own child-rearing problems. The humans had become known as the child whisperers, beings who could heal young ones not just medically, but emotionally. But the most important moment came during a ceremony to celebrate the first anniversary of humans and Zenthari cooperation. Elder Vaktar stood before a crowd of thousands holding little Nexara in his arms. For generations we believed that to protect our young we must make them hard, he announced. We thought that suffering created strength, and that love created weakness. He looked down at Nexara, who was playing with a small toy that Helen had made for her. But the humans taught us something that changed everything. They showed us that to truly protect our young, we must first make them loved. Love doesn't make our cubs weak. Love gives them a reason to be strong. The crowd of Zenthari and humans cheered together. In the nursery behind them, hundreds of cubs played and learned and grew, surrounded by the love of two species who had learned to see beyond their differences. Dr. Lisa Martinez stood with War Prime Kethvar watching the celebration. Do you think it will last? She asked. This new way of raising children? Kethvar smiled, an expression that would have been impossible for him a year ago. Look at them, he said, pointing to where Danny was teaching a group of cubs how to plant flowers in the nursery garden. These cubs will grow up to be parents themselves someday. They will raise their own children with love because it's the only way they know. And when those children grow up, they will do the same. You humans didn't just save 17 dying cubs, Dr. Martinez. You saved our entire future. As the twin suns set over Cathara, the sound of children's laughter filled the air. It was a sound that would never again be strange or frightening to the Zenthari. It was the sound of hope, love, and a species learning that the greatest strength of all was the courage to care.